When did the church first confess Jesus as God? Was it late, maybe near the 300s at the Council of Nicaea, or was it much earlier? Let's talk about that today. Welcome to Clarity and Brevity. When did the early Christians confess Jesus as divine? Some people have made a big deal of this and said it's very late. But in fact, the early church consistently, from our earliest recoverable days, confessed Jesus as divine. Let's talk about one example in this video. That's a guy named Ignatius of Antioch. Ignatius wrote probably 7 letters that we have, and he wrote by the latest, the 130s, and maybe earlier than that. Ignatius explicitly identifies Jesus as God a number of times. For example, in his introduction to the letter to the Ephesians, he talks about Jesus Christ our God. It's very clear for Ignatius that Jesus is divine. There's a number of passages in Ignatius where the roles for God or Jesus are conflated or exchanged, showing a very close relationship between the Father and the Son. For example, prayers can be made both to God and to Jesus. See, for example, to the Romans that he wrote. Now, Ignatius was a church leader, and the letters that he wrote, we can safely assume, without too much of a stretch, that he is representing what the church at that early stage believed. Ignatius also uses the same title for different persons of the Trinity in the same context. So on the one hand, in Ephesians 1:1, this is Ignatius's letter to the Ephesians, he speaks of God as distinct from Jesus Christ, and then in the next phrase speaks of the blood of God, which must refer to Jesus. Ignatius talks about Jesus as the pre-existent Son of God who spoke in the Old Testament. He says Jesus is the key to understanding the Old Testament. He is the door to the Father, even for Old Testament believers. And wherever his people are gathered, there Jesus is gathered with them. This is echoing the Emmanuel theme from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus is our life, which is associated in the New Testament with Christ's divinity. He is our gracious Savior. So for Ignatius, here's one example of a church leader who clearly understood Jesus to be divine. But notice something else. Ignatius does not believe only that Jesus is divine, he also believes that Jesus is truly human. Jesus is truly God and truly human. This is remarkable for the clarity with which Ignatius speaks very early on in the 2nd century. Jesus is the new man, Ignatius says. He is descended from King David according to the flesh, very similar to Paul's letter to the Romans chapter 1. Jesus came in obedience to the one who sent him. He suffered that we might escape death. Ignatius calls Jesus the God who suffered. Although God cannot suffer, he says, Jesus is the divine Son who suffered in the flesh. And not only did he die, but he rose again. Jesus' suffering and death for Ignatius really matter. By the suffering of the divine Son of God, we are saved. Ignatius is clearly interested in showing not only is Jesus divine, but he is also human. We could add other examples to this. In addition to Ignatius, we could look at Clement of Rome, who wrote 1 Clement. This was written in the 1st century. He also speaks of Jesus as divine, echoing the letter to the Hebrews. Another example from the 2nd century is an author named Justin Martyr. According to Justin, Jesus is both Christ and God. He is Lord of all. And for Justin, the divinity of Christ does not undermine Jesus' true humanity. Justin often speaks about Jesus' virgin birth, speaks about Christ being born without sin, the miracles that Jesus did, his suffering, his death. So for Justin, here's another author who speaks of the divinity of Christ and his humanity. We could add other authors here. There's too many for me to mention in this short video, but another would be Irenaeus of Lyon. Irenaeus' writings, for example, the demonstration of the apostolic preaching, bears a Trinitarian character, and this is in the late 2nd century. So the view that says that the early church did not believe Jesus as divine, that suffers from a significant lack of evidence. There's a number of writings that we have from the early church that speak about Jesus' divinity and his humanity, both being true very early. Now, the most important thing to note, though, is that not what Justin said, or Irenaeus, or Ignatius, but that what they are giving us is teaching that comes from the Bible. The Bible itself teaches that Jesus is truly God and truly man, and the Bible is our final authority. So if you hear someone who suggests that Jesus is not divine until the Council of Nicaea, or if you're wondering these things yourself, read the letters of Ignatius, read Irenaeus, read Justin, read the Epistle of Barnabas, read the Epistle to Divinity, read a lot of these early Christian authors and see just how prevalent the early church's understanding of Jesus was as truly God and truly man. But don't stop there. Also open the Bible. Read John 1. Read Hebrews 1. Read some of these texts that speak very clearly about the true humanity and the true divinity of Christ. He is our hope and salvation. Thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful. Remember to keep it clear and focus on Christ.